Well, good evening and welcome to the meeting with the mayor. It's been a long time and things sure have changed since the start of this pandemic, and the way we meet is also different. This evening, I have the honor of hosting candidates for the Pierce County Sheriff, Ed Troyer, Cyndie Fajardo, and the write-in candidate, Janice Bridges. And I want to welcome them all to this meeting. The purpose of the meeting is not for me to advocate for any one candidate, but to provide information to the citizens of University Place as they make their decision on who the next sheriff of Pierce County will be. I want to thank you guys for joining me this evening. I don't know if you were informed or not. This is a casual question conversation. I don't intend this to be a debate. I am not intending on timing you on your responses, but I do ask you to be cognizant of the fact that there are three individuals here advocating for this position. So if you could be concise with your responses, and I hope we don't end up in getting on the news for getting real raucous here. So I am Caroline Belleci. I am the mayor of University Place, and I'm very honored to have you all three here this evening. This is actually the first time I was even aware that we had a write-in candidate. So thank you very much, Janice, for showing up this evening. With that, I would like each of you to introduce yourself, give me a brief statement of what you feel makes you the outstanding candidate for this position. And so I am going to start with the first person that signed on, and that will be Janice Bridges. So Janice.
Oh. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I'm Janice Bridges. I'm a 30-plus year resident of Pierce County. And I am retired from about 17 years working at Pierce County Juvenile Court. And I have 4 adult children. 2 of them live here in Tacoma, and 1 is in Seattle, 1's in Virginia. And I have 4 amazing grandsons. And what brought me to this was, at this particular time in our country and our county, is my concern for the fact that there are 2 Americas and 2 Pierce counties, 2 Washington states when it comes to the state of law enforcement in our country. So as a white woman, I have always felt protected by law enforcement. And over the years, I've become increasingly aware, as we all have, that in Pierce County, there are 60,000 of my neighbors who feel almost the exact opposite in their attitudes towards law enforcement. We know that across our country and right here in our county, Black people are being killed by law enforcement. And so it was really my increasing awareness of that disparity and the fact that I really can't rest comfortably in a country, in a city, in a county where so many of my neighbors have that sort of experience, that they have to have the talk with their children about what to do if you meet up with law enforcement, that they worry every day if they or their loved ones will come home alive when they go out the door. And so I've just been talking to folks around the county. First was my daughter, who, when we were looking at our voters pamphlets, were wondering who was bringing in the conversation about the value of Black lives. And so she and I talked about that, and she said, well, you can talk about that. So I have never run for political office before, but I really love where I live, and I want all of us to be safe where we live. I want all of us to be proud of where we live. I want you, your kids, my kids, our grandkids, all of us, including the Black community, the Brown community, Indigenous, to be safe, to be cared for, to be given full dignity, and to come to the place where we don't have these two Pierce counties where some folks are afraid of getting stopped by the police or the deputies, and others of us feel protected. So I have a lot of ideas about where to go from here, but that's why I became involved in this. Thanks.
Thank you, Janice. Ed, I know you've been with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department for a long time. What makes you the standout candidate? You are muted, sir. Yep, you're still muted. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, my mouth was moving. I just wasn't talking. Sorry. I've been with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department for 35 years. I spent 10 years of that on the streets and patrol when you total up 5 years of investigations. And then for the last 20 years as part of Paul Pastor, retired Sheriff Paul Pastor's command staff. I'm born and raised in Pierce County, and I've actually lived in University Place twice in my life. Both my son and grandson. My foster son who's 21 now, my grandson who's 20 went to school in University Place, and my daughter currently lives there, and my grandkids go to school there. I was actually one of the first 2 police officers in University Place with Jesus Villahermosa when we used to work out of the bank at 44th and Bridgeport. I know UP, I've lived there, I know the schools and teachers, and watch my kids grow up in University Place. I love the community. I love the Pierce County Sheriff's Department and our people, and I look forward to being the next sheriff. I think that what I bring to the table is my community involvement in some of my community service and things I've done over the years. I've been the executive director of the Tacoma Pierce County Crime Stoppers program for over 15 years. We also have Charlie's Dinosaur and lots of other programs underneath that the deputies and detectives help us with. I've also been on the Washington State Gambling Commission for 6 years. I just left that a few weeks ago after serving a 6-year term, so I understand state level and policy making. One of the other things I've done is I've run the Toys for Tots program in Pierce County wide for 15 years. And I worked with the UP schools many times. When my kids and my grandkids were 5 years old and I took them to our toy warehouse, they went and told the teacher that their dad and grandpa had a toy warehouse where Santa landed and refilled toys. And they went back to school and told them, the teachers, that. And I got a call from the teacher, which actually led to the boys giving toys away to families in UP in need for all the way till they graduated from high school. Both of them earned their letter in community service. So that's kind of how I'm tied to the community, is through community service. In my own office, I've been our media person, I've been our PIO, you know that, but I also wrote the original Amber Alert plan. We run our social media. We run the child abduction response team, Silver Alert. I've been next to Paul, like I said, Pastor for years. I know our department inside and out, our budget. Been in administration for 20 years, 10 years on the street, and 5 years in investigations, and I'm ready to lead. I don't want to end my career, and when I do end my career, I want it to be with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Cyndie, same question for you. What makes you the outstanding candidate? I understand you have many years under the as a Pierce County deputy. So please give us an insight into Cyndie.
Well, thank you so much for having us this evening. This is a great forum for us to give a preview of what a new administration might look like with the Sheriff's Department. I've actually been a law enforcement officer for 36 years. I'm 4th generation. My family all are New York City police officers, but I started my career in Colorado. I spent 4 years there and met my husband. He is also a deputy, and we came in 1988 when Pierce County had put forward a levy to hire 50 deputies. So we actually lateraled from Colorado here to Washington State. So I did start my career as a deputy working the streets, and I promoted to sergeant and worked in the city of Lakewood and unincorporated Lakewood. After that, what I advanced to was I was selected to be actually the contract chief of the town of Steilacoom. So I know that that's very important to University Place residents, because as a contract city with the Sheriff's Department, it's nice to know that you have someone who's actually sat in that chair and knows about individual city identity and the autonomy that the cities like to have in the representation of their sheriff's department, although they still may be, not fully city employees. I did that for about 3.5 years, and then I went off to the FBI National Academy, where I was nominated and selected to attend a nearly 3-month program on executive police leadership. When I returned from Quantico, I went back to Lakewood and promoted to lieutenant. I served 9 years as the guild president, which gives me a lot of experience with the aspect of labor management and rights of employers and rights of employees. I also was named as the community liaison lieutenant for the sheriff's department. So all of my nearly 10 years of working in that position was building community relationships between all of the entities throughout Pierce County. I was in charge of actually 11 different programs, 11 different budgets, 11 different groups of personnel, all with different missions and all with different reporting requirements. So it was a nice little juggling act. If that wasn't enough, they threw on animal control and also the Parkland-Spanaway precinct, where then I became responsible for 1/2 of Central Patrol, along with all my other duties. I was very proud of my selection for the Parkland-Spanaway precinct because it was a brand new, let's get it started, let's show the citizens that we care about them precinct, and worked very, very hard in that situation. And it was very, very fulfilling. I currently am the commander for the Mountain Detachment and the Foothills Detachment, which is everything from 224th up to the park and the Ording Valley, all the way up to to Crystal Mountain Ski Resort. It's about 1,400 square miles, and we don't have enough personnel. And I know that's also an issue that University Place struggles with. And I believe that all of that variety of experience with all the different budgets and all the labor issues, the community work, and to throw in the fact that I'm very versed in emergency management. I spent 3 months at DEM working on the COVID issue with Jennifer Hale from the University Place on how do we reinstitute what normal is going to look like when COVID finally gives us a break and lets us start living our lives again. But I'm also with the Urban Search and Rescue team, and I have traveled all over the country helping citizens and communities with their disasters. Most importantly, locally in Oso, I was the commander for the team that went to Oso and recovered the poor souls that were lost in their landslide. So my purview is very, very broad and expanded, and it encompasses a lot of different things that not only deals with the law enforcement aspect of it, but the community aspect, a very strong community aspect, and very strong emergency management. And I believe that's what makes me the best candidate to be your next sheriff.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next question, now that we've gotten the basic introduction on your background and your ideas, I'd like to know what your top 3 objectives are if you are selected as sheriff. So I will start with Ed this time.
Well, the big thing right now, obviously, is COVID, and that changed everything, especially for all of us running for election. And it appears that all 3 of us are first timers at this, but kind of had to learn how we go. COVID has done some strange things to law enforcement in that our jail used to hold 12, we'll hold up to 1,400 people. We have 1,100, 1,200 people usually. Now we're down to 600 people. And the 600 people are there really need to be there. They're felons or people that have committed really serious crimes. And we've let a lot of people out of jail, some that shouldn't be there to begin with, and some that need to be there. And that's why our property crimes are skyrocketing. And there's a lot more assaults and a lot more domestic violence and a lot of things going on that shouldn't be going on. But when you don't have teeth on the back end to have a place to take people, that's what's going to happen. So the sooner we can get people back into the correctional facility, back, not just that, but the courts, we got to get people back into the courts. The courts and the prosecutors aren't able to charge people because cases are piling up because we haven't been able to open up the courthouse fully yet. There's a lot of things going on with COVID that we're going to have to overcome. Also, when it comes to what's going on in the community right now, one of the old sayings is, if there's something wrong with somebody and they have mental health issues, homeless issues, or addiction issues, it was always sent to cops to handle. It shouldn't have been that way. One of the things I like to say is, if you're in a car accident and you're hurt, you know what? The deputies are probably going to show up first because they're rolling around and they're there. If you got a minor injury, we're trained in first aid. We can help you. But if you got broken bones and you're unconscious, you don't want the deputies helping you. You want the paramedics to come, put you in an ambulance, take you to a hospital where a doctor is. Now, why can't we do the same thing with social workers for homeless, counselors for addiction, and also anybody that has mental health issues? We should have mental health pros dealing with. Deputies get there and make sure the scene's safe. And we can take mental health workers like our co-responder program, which works great, where we integrate mental health workers to handle suicide people, people that are in distress. We have social workers that know the services for the homeless. And we have drug and alcohol abuse counselors for people that are addicted. And that way they can do that. It lets us get back to real police work and be able to do what we're supposed to be doing. And people from social agencies and other agencies can help people stay on track, find services for them in the future. So I would love to integrate a lot of that into police work. We are not defunding. We are lucky enough to have a county council executive and council members that have given us 28 positions. And we just swore 4 ex-Seattle police officers in last week. And let's get our guys on the street to do police work, keep the community safe, and the vulnerable and the people in need, get them the services they need. And I would love to incorporate that, and I would support that 100%.
Okay, thank you. Cyndie, same question to you. What are your top 3 priorities as sheriff?
Well, of course, your top 3 priorities always start with getting your feet on the ground. So once elected, of course, I will take the time to do an evaluation or a gut check of where we are on things. However, one of the biggest concerns that I've had for a number of years is a lack of diversity within the law enforcement side of our agency. We seem to have great success in the Corrections Bureau of being able to recruit minorities into those positions in the jail, but we have not been that successful on the law enforcement side of it. And because of that, our department is not a true reflection or a true picture of what our community looks like. And if we are going to make any advancement in all of the racial questions and the social injustice questions, we need to actually truly represent our community in the face of what we look like. It's beneficial for the deputies themselves to have exposure to people of different cultures and different races and different ideas. And it's also benefit for the community. That is one of the main things I want to look at is as to why we are not successful in that area. The second thing that needs to be looked at is we need to redefine or do a reanalysis on what our mission is. Over the years, specifically ever since 2008, there's been mission creep on what the duties of law enforcement, and for that matter, for the fire departments, what are our responsibilities? When we had the recession in 2008, and there was such budget cuts in so many different varieties of programs, social programs, no one had anywhere to go except for calling 911. And we found ourselves having to deal with many more issues regarding mental health and homelessness and addiction that we never did before. And frankly, we're not trained to do that. That's not what our mission is. Our mission is actually law enforcement. So we need to take a reanalysis of the type of calls that we're receiving to see how many of them are really not law enforcement related, but there is social mechanism that we need to try to find alternatives for that. And once that analysis is done, is to look at our staffing and our funding. We have traditionally been understaffed, frankly, since 1992, when we did our last big hiring, and we were at full staff in that time in the sheriff's department. When Lakewood decided to become their own entity and hired people, that was another time and period that we were actually at full staff. But frankly, we have struggled with that. In my 32 career here, we have struggled with that for, I should have put that on mute, for a number of years. That's real life problems right there. And so we have to find a way to meet those staffing needs. And like I said, I am the supervisor for two outlying areas. And I can tell you right now, I probably have 4 deputies in service on Graveyard for 1,400 square miles. If that's not the proper service that our citizens deserve. And it's not fair to my officers to put them in a position where they have only one other person and maybe some adjoining cities to assist them for backup. So we have to attack this, and we have to attack it hard. But we also need to keep in mind the movements that are going on currently, and how do we integrate all of those concerns and actual incidents into how we redefine the police department and the sheriff's department.
Well, thank you, Cyndie. Now, Janice, I know in your opening statement you mentioned diversity and the Black Lives Matter as being a priority. What are your other two priorities?
Well, I think the way that I would work with that, I really appreciate both Cyndie and Ed mentioning the fact that law enforcement officers are asked to do many things that are outside the purview of law enforcement. And so I think that's a really important place to look at, is how we can create a team of community responders. And one of the programs I've been looking at pretty in depth, as well as several others around the country, is a program in Eugene, Oregon that's been operating for about 30 years. So they've worked out a lot of the kinks, and it's called the Cahoots program. And they reworked their 911 system so that calls are triaged from the beginning. And so if they are mental health, addiction issues, homelessness, all those sorts of things, and there's no immediate life or death threat going on, one of the teams for the community responders goes out, and last year they got about 25,000 calls, and they called for law enforcement backup on 150 of those calls. So that's freed up a lot of time from their law enforcement officers to do what is needed from them, but also gives the community members more help. They don't get entangled in the criminal justice system. They get the help they need. Of course, one of our issues here is we don't have all the resources we need for programs for the homeless, for mental health, for drug and alcohol issues. So that's a big area to tackle, but I think it's interesting that all of us mentioned that. Mm-hmm. I'm also looking at the fact that, we've seen so many instances where traffic stops have turned deadly across the nation and in our own state and in Pierce County. And so 50% of all of the public's interaction with law enforcement comes through traffic stops. So looking at ways of reducing the harm that can come through those is, I think, important. And so that would be looking at programs like what they're doing in the Bay Area in Berkeley. They've just moved most of their patrols into a separate department called Berkeley Department of Transportation. And they are unarmed safety patrols, traffic safety patrols, who basically make sure everyone's following the rules, that everyone's safe. If someone's got trouble, they help and have a little more of a role that would be akin to a building inspector or health inspector. They're making sure everyone's being safe. They can also, report like other folks do on whether there's unsafe or, not clear signage, road stuff, all that sort of thing. So I think that's an interesting thing to look at, as well as optimizing technology we already have for electronic ticketing, that sort of thing. So I think anything we can do to reduce those sorts of interactions that can become so deadly is important. We've all heard the names of our neighbors who've been killed during interactions with law enforcement. Manny Ellis, Leonard Thomas, Saeed Joaquin, Benny Branch, Jackie Salyers, so many others. I don't want there to be any more. So those are my big priorities.
Well, thank you. I noticed all three of you did mention the role of policing and how the community perceives that. But you talked more in generalities. Do you each have some specific ideas of how you would approach that should you be chosen for sheriff? So I will start with Cyndie this time.
I'm still an advocate of the traditional policing methods. I think that they are tried and true for the most part. Of course, there are instances that have come forward that obviously are not within the guidelines and within what we consider to be normal course of action. We receive so many different calls over the day from citizens that range from areas of, you know, I'm locked out of my house, or I haven't seen my neighbor, all the way to my neighbor is running down the street with a knife. What do I do? And so there are such much variety of the calls that a deputy goes to. And a deputy could be going just from a generalization call from a burglary or a theft, and mundane calls all day long, all day long, all day long. And then they get the call where what we have is a beeper. It's an alert that goes over the radio that says, okay, everybody pay attention. This is a top priority call. And you have a situation where they're running priority with lights and sirens. They're trying to figure out how to get to where they're at. They are totally at a hyper state when they respond. They get there, take care of the situation, or they get there and there is no situation, and then they kind of dial back down to that, you know, that mundane taking a report, taking a report, taking a report. So when we look at policing and how do we re-envision it is, you know, first of all, do we need a uniformed officer to go to general calls like a theft or a burglary? Are there other options there? You know, we have such a hard time recruiting law enforcement right now. Again, I'm talking about the law enforcement side of the house. I'm not talking about the correction side of the house. Where do we have the opportunity to use retired officers that have that training and have that experience and no longer want to carry a gun to handle those calls without displacing? Of course, this is where we get into the union issue, without displacing any of the officers on the street. And do we save those officers for those calls where they need those technical skills of firearms trainings, of defensive tactics, of criminal investigations? Is there a path forward to separate those two? We've had community support officers for a number of years within the Sheriff's Department, and we have utilized them in the past for our community relations work. They have taken what we consider to be non-victim reports at our precincts for over the years. Is there a way to expand that? We have a way then to save some money. We have a way to maybe even increase our service, because you call for a burglary report right now, you may wait 3, 4, 5 hours before a deputy comes to the house to take your report. And it may only be for insurance purposes only. So we do need to look at what policing is and what is it defined as. Janice has mentioned the program down in Eugene, and there are a number of those same typical programs across the country that have been so successful. There's no sense of reinventing the wheel. We have been an innovator here in Pierce County with both our mobile crisis intervention team, which deals with people who are prolific 911 callers. This is something that has burdened both the Sheriff's Department and nearly all the fire departments within Pierce County, because we have to go do welfare checks on these people who are calling us for no good reason than just to call us. Now we have the MSER team that can take those calls. They can get treatment for these people. They can help them get employment. They can try to get them stabilized. In some cases, they even find them better housing. And we then have somebody now who's contributing to society rather than just using up our 911 calls. And then we have the mobile response team, where we have a social worker trained in crisis management, teamed with a deputy, and they go on those type of calls. I think we can all agree that sometimes the uniform is the aggravator when somebody's in a situation of mental health crises. They may have had experience in the past where an officer came and took them off to a mental health facility where they've been involuntarily committed for 48 or 72 hours. So it's a negative reaction that they may have. So we have to look at better ways to do the job that we have to do. But frankly, we're all in this together. It's just a matter of finding our path forward to see what is going to be best for everyone involved.
Well, thank you. Same question to you, Ed, regarding your vision for how you would approach the role of the police officer.
Well, right now, there's probably 10,000 misdemeanor warrants for people that are out there. And there's just nowhere to put them. And there's no reason for them to have gotten in that situation, a lot of them. The sad part is if you're speeding and you get a traffic ticket for 15, 14 over, it's a couple $100s. A lot of people in our population can't afford that couple $100. They're working day to day and living paycheck to paycheck. And then if you don't pay that ticket, you go to license suspended 3rd degree. And if you don't show up for court for that, you go to license suspended 2nd degree. You know what happens after that? You can be taken to jail on a criminal charge. That's not right. First of all, when that happens, you bring somebody to jail because they didn't pay an original speeding ticket. There's no other company or organization in the world that can tell you if you don't pay us the $240 you owe us, we're going to take you to jail and you're going to have a criminal record. That's wrong. And there needs to be a way, like Janice talked about earlier, we can do speed machines and lower the price of tickets and not have people out writing tickets, but you get a ticket in the mail just like you do when you run a red light and you pay your 50, 60 bucks and you learn your lesson. We don't need to turn it into taking time from the officers, taking time from the court, and have exorbitant amount of money that somebody's not going to pay that turns it into a criminal issue. That's one thing that we could change that would lessen the burden on both corrections and the law enforcement side. Right now, it costs $62 a day to keep somebody in jail. That's a lot of money when they could be out supporting their families, when they could be out making money and doing good things in the community. For the last 10 years, I've been lucky enough to run Toys for Tots, and we have inmate crews both from the Women's Purdy Center and sometimes the Pierce County when it's pouring down rain. And they go out and volunteer, and when you have 8 to 10 people with one guard, and they're down there working in volunteer capacity, whether they're on the roads cleaning or whether they're sorting toys, you know, they feel good at the end of the day. I've had a lot of them come back after they've gotten out and bring their kids. And there's got to be a path out of just sitting in jail and doing nothing. I'm a big advocate in having training in jail, classes in jail, and let's get people the tools to not come back. Let's, first of all, try and not get them there. Now, believe me, there are some people that need to be locked up. And there are people that harm people and people that do bad things to children and are elderly that are vulnerable and steal from. There's a place in the jail for them always. Other people that we can take a different look at and a different way of doing it and get them out of the court system, get them treatment, and get them moving forward so they can take care of their families and take care of their kids. I'm all for that. And I'm also for different ways, like Cyndie said, the citizen volunteers that actually we incorporate in to do the radar and when they do the meetings and when they do crime prevention, and they're all part of that. It makes them feel inclusive as a partnership with the community. We've gotten a little bit away from that because we've been really busy. And right now, as we come out of COVID, is a good time for a reset and to redo things. So all the money isn't going to incarcerate people, but it's going to help and educate people. So we don't have the recidivism rate. The recidivism rate, I mean, it's interesting when sometimes we put somebody on Washington Most Wanted and find out they've been in jail 7 times in 2 years. It's obviously not working. So we got to do things to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Janice, same question for you. How would you change the role of police in our community? You are muted, ma'am.
I knew I would do that at least once. Where I am right now is very excited about the time we're in, because for the first time ever, talk about radical changes to law enforcement and community safety are being given serious and thoughtful time in conversation everywhere. And I think that's really exciting. And it's a time to re-envision, look at all kinds of potential, and reimagine what community safety is and should be. And I don't think that a bigger or better armed law enforcement cadre equals community safety. I think that healthy communities are safe communities, and that our investment should be in those communities that are not doing well and should be given more access to education, housing, healthy food, recreational areas, family support, daycare, all those good things that we all want for all of our families. And I think that's where we need to start looking for more community safety, is supporting our communities as to the greatest levels that we can. And I also think that traditional, I think Cyndie mentioned traditional policing is working, tried and true. It works for the white community. It does not work for our Black neighbors, as I mentioned earlier. Yes, I feel safe and protected by law enforcement, generally speaking. My Black friends and neighbors do not. So if it doesn't work for all of us, it's not working.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of the predominant things that has been going on since this COVID crisis, or ideas, is that there have been sheriffs throughout the state of Washington that have chosen not to enforce particular laws that have been passed. What would you, as a sheriff, provide to your deputies as guidance if you felt that there was a law that was passed that you view as unconstitutional or unenforceable? So with that, I will go with Janice first.
It's funny. I was just reading an article about that topic, and sort of the latitude that sheriffs have to decide which things they're going to focus on and not focus on. And I think that maybe the scope of the sheriff's office could use some attention too, just with community input. Which brings me to sort of an innovation I would like to implement if I were in the office. I would like to, so I'm retired and I'm fine. I'm not interested in the sheriff's salary or that sort of thing. I would like to create a team of paid community members who would be a community safety council that would be at the helm of the sheriff's office. And I think that having the input from the community, especially the communities we've talked about that are harmed by over-policing, to have community members sit at the helm of the office and look at issues like that. Should the sheriff continue to have as much latitude to decide what and what not to enforce? If something is apparently unconstitutional or looks like it would do more harm in a community than good, with the community input, I think that could be taken to the legislature, but it should not be the decision of one person.
Okay, thank you. Ed, same question to you.
Well, our job is to hold up rights and enforce what the laws are. I think it's a slippery slope when a sheriff starts making up their own decisions on what they're going to enforce and not enforce. I think we need to follow the law, and if the community wants the law or the rules change, and they go about the right way through legislation, like Janice said, and we do it that way, and we don't personally say we're not going to enforce something or we're going to enforce something when it's not the rule of the land and the law, because where does it stop at that point? And there's ways that a sheriff may advocate for a law to be changed or a law to be enforced more, but it shouldn't be an arbitrary decision and tells people to do or not do anything. That's for the greater good of the community. So I also agree with the advisory panel to come talk to us, and I would have an advisory panel I don't know if I agree with the part about paying the advisory panel. I'd find experts that want to help, because once you pay somebody, I think that they could have an ulterior motive. I would like to find people that want to do it out of the good of their hearts, that are involved in the community, have proven that they are wanting to be there for everybody's sake, citizens and deputies and police, to help bring us together. That would be the goal of the advisory panel that I would want. I wouldn't want one just to tell me how good our department's doing or how bad they're doing. I want them to tell me what the community thinks of what we should be doing, and listen. Because actually, as an elected sheriff, you are not the top of the organization. You're the top of the sheriff's department, but you work for the voters and the people that put you there, and they can take you out and take you away anytime.
Thank you, Ed. Cyndie, same question to you, please.
Well, I think the voters of Pierce County made it very clear years back when we had an appointed sheriff as a result of some things that happened in the early 70s, and they went back to an elected sheriff. And the reason they wanted an elected sheriff is they wanted a voice of the people. And the voice of the people is, this is the sheriff who I trust to lead the department in the manner I approve or disapprove of. And the disapprovement, of course, is you don't get reelected. There's a lot of constitutional things that go along with the sheriff's department that are entrenched in history, with the civil division and the ability to evict people, the ability to take property if it's the court has ordered. So there's a lot of tradition and a lot of history and a lot of laws that go with that office of sheriff. It's a very enormous responsibility. As far as picking and choosing what laws get enforced and don't get enforced, there is a constitutional sheriff's association, and I went on their website to see what their platform is, and it was very concerning to me that they believe that their position is they're the ultimate authority. Now, if you will ask me whether or not I believe it's the sheriff's department's role to enforce a mask mandate, I wish I had enough people even to contemplate that. But that's a health department issue, and it's not a law enforcement issue. And I don't believe that my deputies should be in the mix of telling people whether or not they need to or shouldn't be wearing a mask, and do they have an exemption because they have a predetermined condition. That's not a law enforcement role. So, there it is where we potentially have a law or a mandate or an ordinance that doesn't fall into the purview of what our mission is. We have discretion all the time in the laws that we have in place right now. And, I don't have to write everybody a traffic ticket that I pull them over. I can use that as a community effort to get to know who they are, to educate them about what they did wrong, and build goodwill. We can use those moments to build goodwill. Typically, if there's a victim, however, our hands are tied, especially in domestic violence. The rules are very, very strict there. So there is some discretion. So it's not black and white. There is there's a mechanism where we get to weigh what the benefit is on certain things, of course, not on everything, of which is more beneficial for the community that we deal with. And that's an important, I think that's an important part of our democracy for that. And if we have the right people and we train them the right way, and we make them aware of some of the prejudices that have been done in the past, or implied in the past, or taken place in the past, that is a mechanism we can use to build better community relationships.
Thank you. Janice, same question to you. You're muted again, ma'am.
Could you repeat this question?
Basically, what sort of guidance would you give if a law was passed or there was regulations on the books that you have deemed unconstitutional or unenforceable?
I already answered that one.
Oh, did you? Okay. Sorry, I'm not keeping track. I'm getting so engrossed in the conversation here. With the recent events that have occurred with the riots and protests in Seattle and other surrounding jurisdictions, And with our limited police officers that we have currently on staff, how do you balance people's rights to protest and be able to protect property? I will go with Janice this time. Let you go first.
I think that you have to do what you can to allow for peaceful protest, and realizing that protest is the voice of the unheard, people who feel unheard or left out in our communities, and protect their right to protest, and do what you can to prevent harm to people.
Okay, thank you. Cyndie. I'm bouncing all over the place. So you guys are
There we go. So I will confess. Yes, I will confess. When I was younger, I participated in a number of protests over the war, over the environment, and I felt it was my obligation as a citizen to speak up and to let my voice be heard about what I thought was wrong. What I can tell you is that in those protests I took place, I never harmed anybody's property. I never was disrespectful to any of my community or my elders. I was not disrespectful to the law enforcement officers who were there to do a job to make sure that there were no there were no issues. I am 100% behind people being able to get out on the streets and do what they need to do to have their voice heard, as long as they are respectful of the other innocent people who may just happen to be in their neighborhoods. I don't agree with the bashing in of the stores because they think it's capitalism and they shouldn't have a business there. I don't think that it's right to do that. I think there's other mechanisms. Don't buy their shoes if you don't like it. There are innocent businesses up, especially up in Seattle, that currently went out of business because of the ramifications of what happened in the riots that took place up in Seattle. You know, we've been very lucky in Pierce County. We have had a number of protests and demonstrations that have taken place. And I have to applaud those that participated, because they did do it in a peaceful manner, and they still had the opportunity to be heard and to get their mission and to get their voice and their cause in front of people. And I think it carries more weight if you are respectful to other people's property, because now they're actually listening to your message and not to, well, look at all the damage they did. They're no good people. So, you know, you have to weigh that. And if you really want people to seriously take your protest to heart, you can't have a distraction like destroying property.
Thank you. Ed, question to you.
Well, I was very, now that we're past the original beginning of the protests and everything, I was very fortunate, lucky to work amongst the officers and deputies that were involved. And when it first started, we didn't know what was going to happen after we saw what was going up in King County in Seattle. I mean, that was terrible. And we got down here the first couple of nights, what's going to happen? But I'm very proud of the citizens of Tacoma and Pierce County for, you know, protesting and blocking streets and huge crowds, and nothing got damaged. We did have one rough night downtown Tacoma, but when we got downtown Tacoma and saw what was going on and they wrangled those people up, they were all from out of town. They were from Seattle and Portland. They weren't Pierce County, Tacoma residents. We handled it. And I think, you know, mainly what our role turned into for weeks after that was logistics to make sure that nobody got hurt. People were riding on cars. We didn't stop them. We had crowds of people doing protests from Wrights Park, thousands, and they took over the streets, and we made sure the streets were blocked, and we made sure that nobody got hurt. I loved that. I loved being part of it. I loved watching it. And then I also enjoyed when they started breaking windows and wearing masks and going their way, that we were the first ones to say, this is not going to happen here. And when they knew that was going to happen, they got back in buses and went back to Portland, back to Seattle. There was no TV coverage, and we continued to protest peacefully, which I'm 100% supporter of. Let's work with the community. Let's walk amongst them and each other, and let's do this together. Listen to each other and know each other's concerns. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got hit by a car. Nobody fell out of a car. There were no fights, except for that one minor incident that one night in Tacoma, and those were not Tacoma Pierce counties. So I really love how the Department of Emergency Management, the Tacoma Police, the Sheriff's Department, State Patrol, everybody came together in Pierce County to make it accessible for everybody to protest, and that the protesters were respectful to our buildings and the community and the businesses that were here. In fact, after a couple of them were over, I went up to 6th Avenue area in Tacoma and found hundreds of them actually in the restaurants eating food, spending money, buying food to go. So it was a great sight.
Oh, great. The next aspect of questions pertains directly to University Place. As you all three are hopefully aware, University Place was the first city in Pierce County to contract our police services with the Sheriff's Department, and we've been a contract agency for the past 25 years. In fact, we just celebrated our 25th anniversary in August. How do you see the future of contracting for that Pierce County Sheriff's Department currently does? What do you see long-term for Pierce County, for the agencies that you're currently contracting with? I understand it's the city of Edgewood, it's Pierce Transit that's currently contracted, and the city of University Place. So how do you see this overall for the department in general? Ed, I'll let you speak to it first.
Well, right now in UP, we have a chief, we have a sergeant, we have an investigator, 13 deputies, and recently the school resource officers probably not coming back under the same contract. I think the school districts, I'm not sure on how that's going to work, but our office assistant up there and our community liaison public safety coordinator actually are really close to being law enforcement officers themselves. They know everything that goes on in UP, and they help our deputies solve crime. And I think that's great. And you guys tie into a lot of our community programs, and, you know, contracting is great for you guys because the city of University Place doesn't have to have a SWAT team, a mobile command van, teams of detectives, because you just don't need it. But when you do need it, you have the resources of our large department that'll come in and take care of business, for lack of a better word to say, to make sure that the community is safe, crimes are investigated thoroughly. So you have a great local police department. And I know guys that work up there and girls that work up there that do not want to leave there because they love the community. They know the community. They know that. But if something bad happens, you have the resources of the Sheriff's Department and people that know how to investigate major crimes. And we're very good at solving crimes. If you watch anything about us through the media or through just really researching us, we're really good at police work, and that really works for our contract cities. And when you add up the dollars, it saves you a lot of money, because if you had to do all that on your own, it costs you a lot more money. We appreciate doing it, and I know I like being part of University Place, not only by living there, but working with the Sheriff's Department and being able to go up there when things happen and make sure that the community is safe and that our deputies are safe and that we're doing the job that you hired us to do. And I will continue to make sure that people do the job you hired us to do.
Thank you. Janice.
I remembered.
Yeah.
So contracts that are in place will continue, but I would like to do the same process with those cities and agencies that I would with every agency or neighborhood that has interaction with the sheriff's office, which would be to do a local needs assessment and see exactly what the community needs are and what things the deputies do that maybe don't require an armed law enforcement officer. And that would go for every task that deputies and officers are asked to do, is ask about each one of those things. Does this task require an armed officer? So looking at ways to avoid having more arms out in our community streets when they're not needed. And then with that needs assessment, just taking a look at any forces that might be existent that are reproducing inequalities in our neighborhoods, and that would certainly go for University Place. So just going through that process, and then seeing what the community would like, any changes from the relationship, or just seeing how it evolves with those questions in mind. I know that I just was looking at some studies that say that law enforcement officers spend about 4% of their time actually responding to crimes. And I think we could find some better things to do with that time.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Cyndie.
So having been a contract chief for a municipality, I understand the distinct challenges that are faced there. And one of the many reasons that we find, especially new municipalities that are starting up and newly incorporated, is that they are budget challenged. And the sheer costs of patrol cars, of uniforms, the hiring process, sending people through the training academy and having to pay them their salary and benefits while they're being trained for probably up to a year, it is very cumbersome for the cities as they start up. Our relationship, our 25-year relationship with University Place has been an absolute picture perfect model. How many of your contract chiefs left to be part of the sheriff's command staff? I think there are a number of them. That just gives you an idea of the experience that they gain by being the contract chief of University Place. So we have an economy of scale that is beneficial to both the sheriff's department and also to the municipalities. So we have a full service contract with Edgewood and Pierce Transit and University Place. But let's not forget the small town of Eatonville, who we do provide the actual chief for. Although the officers are city employees, it's kind of the same arrangement that was made when I was the chief over at Stillicum, is that it was the city's department. However, the leader was loaned out by the sheriff's department to run that agency. I see contracting as being a big future for the sheriff's department as we continue to see the growth in Pierce County. How many people are leaving King County, coming down to Pierce County, now with the ability to potentially now work from home because of what we've learned in COVID. We're going to have a huge transfer of people working and living in communities. I can see in the future probably Frederickson will probably incorporate into their own city the community of Tahali, because they have both a residential and they're going to also have a business aspect of it. I can see them incorporating. I would hope that they would utilize the sheriff's department for their police services. But it makes sense when we talk about the taxpayer's dollar and whether or not we're good stewards of that money. The economy of scale is one way to say to the citizens, we are doing everything in our power to give you the services that you need, and also maintaining a good, responsible fiscal note involving your dollar. I agree that the sheriff's department is a service provider to these municipalities. These are your cities. You get to decide what you would like to do in your city. And it would be our job to determine whether or not your mission for your police department fits into what our goal is, into how we want to police. And we have always come to the same conclusion in University Place. And that's why we have such a long and loving relationship, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that leads me into my next question. And unfortunately, Janice may be at a bit of a disadvantage in being able to answer this question. But given the fact that we have a 25-year history and both Ed and Cyndie are familiar with the contracting relationship with University Place, how would you want to change the contract relationship between your city and the county? What kind of things could you see being improved upon, being looked at differently? just in general, if you were the chief and the sheriff and had to make some decisions, what do you envision that future to look like for the individual contracted cities? I'll let Cyndie answer first, since Ed got first go at it, and then Janice can think about it and see see if she can come up with some answers. So Cyndie.
And I'm going to apologize, Mayor. I live in rural Pierce County, and all of that didn't come through for me.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to start with another candidate, and then I'll kind of pick up the gist of what the question is and try to answer it.
Well, basically, using your experience and Ed's experience in the sheriff's department with contract agencies, how would you envision making potential changes, or how can we become better partners in the contracting business?
So if I understand the question right, you're looking for how do we improve the contracting business that we currently in?
Right, improve it or change it.
Well, and I think the changes that are going to come are going to be two-faced. I think we're going to see some legislative changes coming out of Olympia based on all of the incidents that have occurred in the few last months. And I think we always need to, it's every business model. You constantly have to look at it to determine whether or not it is still the business model that satisfies both parties. And we have made improvements over the course of our 25-year relationship in tweaking the contract to our benefit and to your benefit. But that is just a proper business plan that anyone should do in any contract that they are involved in. And then when we take into account what we're seeing as far as the questions that are being raised about how policing is done, we need to find out what is the model for University Place in regards to those issues, and what kind of changes need to be made, if any, or enhancements that need to be made, if any, to meet those goals that we are hearing the cries for.
Okay, thank you. Ed, questions to you.
Well, obviously, a good business model will, not only what can you afford and how do we make it work together, but it's up to the city to determine what they want us to do and not do. Just like, the school resource officer may be budgeted a different way, but that's up to you. That's not up to us. We think school resource officers are very beneficial for many reasons. They find out what's going on in the community, but we're not going to tell you that, yes, you're going to have a school resource officer unless you want one. Also, how much traffic do you want? You guys have done such a good job up in UP from when I worked up there to traffic calming. I mean, people used to use Bridgeport as a raceway. I worked there when it was like that. Now you have roundabouts and you have crosswalks and sidewalks, and there's not a lot of traffic accidents in UP when we respond to major wrecks daily when I was up there. So what you guys have done as a city is now we don't need a traffic unit. Before, you needed a traffic unit up there. So things change, times change. What does the city want to do? Do you want people to work more juvenile, work with the kids? Do you want more detectives to investigate property crimes? Nothing's free. You pay for what you want. But if that's what the city wants, then that's me as a sheriff, so I'm going to give you. And, we also have the main things that we got to enforce: domestic violence and mandatory laws. And we do all the sex offender tracking throughout the county in every city. That stuff comes with the contract. You would keep all that, but we want to customize the group of people that you want up there to do what you think your community needs. And that's always changing. That's always evolving. And we are very, very good at evolving and changing and learning from what works and what doesn't work. And I would stay on that path.
Thank you. Okay, Janice, do you have any comments in regards to that?
Yes, I think that both Ed and Cyndie talked about maintaining a good relationship, having ongoing conversation, community, and assessing on an ongoing basis what the community wants and what would add to the true safety and health of the community, and how the office could be part of that, or whether certain functions should be handed off to other agencies or professionals that could better serve in those things. So yeah, I think just keeping up good relationships, making every contract agency or municipality part of the team that's looking at community needs will be important ongoing. So,
Okay. As do you all three know, the elected sheriff takes the oath of office immediately after the election has been certified. So do you have individual immediate plans on how you will restructure your command staff? So I'll ask Janice this one first.
I think that my answer about looking at establishing a community safety council would be one of the first priorities, just to get folks in that have a good background in their communities in safety, maybe scholars, folks from who are visionaries, who are interested in making our communities safe and healthy. So that would be one of my first priorities. And then just really getting to know all the folks and getting to know the inner workings. My background is not law enforcement, although I did spend several weeks at the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Academy. I had to do that for positions I held at Raymond Hall. But I did work on the civil side there. So yeah, definitely would have a lot of catching up to do, but have all sorts of visions and a really big desire to listen to the folks in the office and then the community and see how we can go from there.
Okay, thank you. Ed?
Well, as far as command staff goes, we have 12 or 13 appointed positions, depending on how far you want to go and make changes. And I think it would be prudent for Cyndie to be getting ready just like I am, because you're right. Usually in an election, you take over in January, but having the sheriff spot vacant is probably going to happen around November 25th, from what I understand, when they certify the election. And it wouldn't be prudent for either of us not to be ready, because we've lost 6-7 weeks of transition time. And we need to be able to keep moving, hit the ground running. And I have got that whole entire team in place. Most of them are aware of it, and we're not tip our hat, because definitely we do not want to cause people grief in case one of us doesn't make it, job loss or scrutiny. And I expect Cyndie to do the same thing. I'm sure she's ready. I'm ready. And I have a team of people that will be able to take care of business, people that will be experts in their fields, and people that will go out and make a difference right away. Paul Pastor was a great sheriff. He has a different type of philosophy than I do. I love the man. I look at him as a brother, sometimes a father. I've learned a lot from him. I would be more somebody that would be in the field and somebody that would be more active along with our leaders. I'd spread our leaders out, not keep them at headquarters. I would try and get the dialogue from the top down to the bottom and the bottom up to the top through different methods that I've got saved and I'm looking forward to implementing. And that will help everybody, not only our deputies and our command staff communicate better, but it'll also put some of our leaders amongst the county and more accessible to citizens. So I'm ready to go with that plan, and I'm looking forward to implementing it and moving forward and doing a lot of changes over the next 4 years. Like I said, we do a lot of things really, really good, better than others. And there are some things that we can do better, and some things we're not doing at all that we need to be doing. And I'm ready to implement that and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Cyndie?
I treat the transition of sheriff to be more like a new CEO coming into an organization. And you don't pilfer your command staff the first day that you're there. That doesn't solve any problems, and it doesn't hurt it hurts the organization, it hurts the community that it serves. So my plan when I'm taking office is to meet with the current command staff, find out the status of what they plan on doing, what their hopes are, what their plans would be, and also what projects they're currently working on, and then make an evaluation of whether or not their philosophies fit in with my vision and my mission, and work from there. This transition is not going to be done overnight. It's not going to be done in 1 day or 2 days. For the health of the organization, it's something that has to be transitional over, the first probably 90 days of the new regime, the new administration. And that's only fair for the deputies. It's only fair for the customers like yourself. So you have an idea of what's coming and what the plan is. And so the thought that day one after the election being certified, you stand up there and say, okay, everybody clear out your offices. That's not reasonable, and it's not responsible. And so I will take my time in determining who my command staff will be. Some may stay, some may not stay. And it's going to be a transition that's going to be beneficial for the department to keep it stable and to keep us moving forward and getting the job done. We do not need to rock the boat any more than it needs to be while we make this transition.
Thank you. Janice, did you answer? You answered that question, yeah. One of the benefits of having had a long tenured relationship with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department is that we did have an opportunity to meet on a regular basis with the elected sheriff or his command staff in regards to our contract. So would you have a dedicated person that you would assign to your specific contracts, be a point person, or would you yourself be the individuals that would be handling this relationship? Cyndie, I'll let you go first.
So of course it's a business relationship, but for the everyday management of the contracts, it's very important to have somebody in place that knows those things inside out and one side the other, and can have that daily contact with the customer. As the sheriff, however, you'll have my personal phone, and if there's an issue that comes up, you will be able to contact me at any time that you feel that you need to have something that is over what the representative can handle. If it's a CEO to CEO conversation that needs to take place, of course, that's something that is just a phone call away. But for consistency's sake, because we're looking at potentially growing our contracts and also managing the contracts we have, it's only prudent to have somebody who is got the hands-on everyday knowledge of the moving parts of those contracts. Understand, we haven't talked at all about our jail in any of these conversations. So not only do we have this law enforcement house that we've spent over an hour talking about, those same issues and those same problems go over to that little city that we have on South Tacoma, that Tacoma Avenue, that we also have to deal with.
Yeah, correct. Janice.
Yes, a lot of what Cyndie said, I agree with. I would definitely be available to speak to our contractors, but also have a dedicated person in that function to manage all of the day-to-day things. But I would also like to get out and meet, once we can meet physically, with the folks in those municipalities, either one-on-one or at city council meetings, whatever format, and make that a regular part of the schedule.
Okay, thank you. Ed.
We actually have a position. Our chief of staff is actually our contract services managers. Everybody remembers Julie Williams, and she's no longer there. And now it's Mike Blair, who was actually the police chief in University Place and loved by many up there. And we still have that position, who would handle the contracts and be the liaison for the city and handle the business end of it, because there's the county, the business end of it, the law enforcement, and the city of UP. But as sheriff, if there's a problem or somebody wants to talk about an issue or wants to, expand or see what we could do differently, I would absolutely be there and be available for any meeting to figure it out and see what needs to be done. And as Cyndie talked about the jail, that is a monstrosity in itself. I always like that our sheriff called it the biggest hotel in Tacoma, and it is, and it's full of many felons and people with mental health issues, and contracting with the jail Right now, we have 7 open pods, and we had 3 open pods before COVID. But yet, municipalities and jurisdictions were taking people to Nisqually jail, clear up the King County score, and to Fife because it was cheaper to put them in jail down there on a daily rate. We got to come up with a way where we got to utilize our pods, utilize our people, and keep them there. We shouldn't be sending Tacoma officers and UP officers and other officers that got to go on a 2-hour ride to take somebody to jail when we can do it in 15 minutes in our own correctional facility. So that is something that really needs to be worked on, where we keep all of our contract cities and all the cities that aren't our contract cities, including the Furcrests and the Gig Harbors and the Tacomas, bringing their people to our correctional facility for 2 reasons. It's more convenient because then you're not taking them back and forth to court when they got to go to court the next day, and it puts officers on the street longer. And that would be a really good solution for everybody involved, and that would be something I would work on to help fix that problem.
Thank you. One of the biggest problems recently is the public's understanding of how deputies and officers are selected and trained. How, as sheriff, would you act to bridge that gap in the lack of understanding of the process? Janice.
First, I would get educated myself on that process and see where it appears to me that there are issues. I know that there is a lot of public perception that, police officers would do better, or any law enforcement, if they had more kinds of training, whether implicit bias training, all those sorts of things. What sort of psych evals are they given before they're hired? What sort of scrutiny of their past records, and were they employed at other law enforcement agencies? Are those looked at before they're hired at a different agency? So getting the answers to all of those things, and then making that process very transparent to the public, I think is really important. And, taking it from there, looking at that process, messaging it, and then having the public weigh in on what should be changed. And there is a group working right now at Pierce County, the Law and Justice Community, I think, committee, or review committee, that's looking at the self-reports that the sheriff, corrections, the prosecutor, Department of Assigned Counsel have done on their own departments as far as bias and inequities in their systems. And so there's community involvement right now, and I think that would be a good group and forum to continue with when messaging out about the hiring process and getting input on maybe what could be changed to make things work better.
Okay, thank you. Ed.
You cut out a little bit at the beginning of that question. I couldn't pick up what the question was by Janice's answers. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, with the current events and so forth, it's become evident that the public's understanding of how deputies and officers are selected and trained is somewhat lacking. So how would you as a sheriff act to bridge that gap in the public? Well,
I don't think our department has that issue. Our department has great training, and we have training, but what we need to do is have pertinent training and training that matters, not the stuff that's mandated by the state that has nothing to do with what we're doing. We need to come up with our own training and figure out what we need to do better and learn better, and then train our people as time moves on and things change. One of the things that we're doing right now in our hiring is, I don't believe we should lower standards to hire anybody unless they meet the standards that are there, because the public's asking to have higher standards. So if we lower standards to hire people, that's bad. What we need to do is train people better. I get that in the state academy, but I also think if issues arise, it's a revolving and evolving issue that we need to stay on top of, have the training available as the public and the community sees fit. And we need to be able to answer those calls, answer those problems, and be able to address those issues on an evolving matter. And what we're doing is trying to hire people in a world where it's hard to get people to apply for this job. Like I said a little bit earlier, we just hired 4 Seattle officers, 2 of them of color, and they didn't have to go to the academy, and they're in training right now, and they're going to be on the streets in a couple of weeks. We have 15 more that applied for us that we're doing backgrounds on. It's not a matter of coming down and somebody coming down and saying, I want to work for you. I work for Seattle. Well, here's your job. We actually went through 13 officers to get the 4 we have, and we turned others down. So we're very selective. We are looking for women and minorities, and this is a good time to do it. And it's good all the way around. Like Cyndie said earlier, we can all learn from each other, and let's do that. That would be my plan.
Okay, but you haven't addressed how you would relay that information to the public, and how you would let the public know what's happening.
Okay, so how we would relay the information, what I just said, to the public? I guess I'm confused on what your question was, because I didn't hear the first part of it.
Well, the public's understanding of how deputies are selected and trained seems to be lacking. They seem to lack the understanding of the types of training that officers go through. So how would you bridge that gap?
Well, we have 85,000 people, 90,000 people following us on social media, and we do a good job of showing our new officers their backgrounds, what they did before they became deputies. We do a really good job of that. We're the second most followed entity in Pierce County behind the News Tribune as far as social media goes. We do a lot of different things at our department graduations. We love to brag about our people. We like to show what they do, what they did before. We need to reach out to the public and say, a lot of the people that were here used to do this. We have school teachers, we have military, we have people who've left hardcore white collar jobs at banks, make a lot of money, and have decided they want to come do this. And we are doing a really good job of putting that out there, that we have people that are wanting to come do this because they have a heart for service, and that job's available to them. And we need to be able to let the public know, yes, this happened. This is a new incident going on, and here's what we're doing for training. And right now, unfortunately, we can't have large classrooms, so a lot of our training is through video and online, and just like we're doing this right now. But we still have people being kept up to date on anything that's new or that happens. And what we really do is we have a lot of people that do it on their own when they find out an issue, and create their own training programs and within our own department. And we need to take that information where somebody's become a self-taught expert and recognize a problem and share it with not only our department members to learn, but let the public know that we are addressing those issues.
Okay, thank you. Cyndie.
So I know that what we hear is when an officer finds himself in a precarious position or in trouble or accused of murdering someone or a crime, and they go back to the hiring process and they see that there's been some association with some kind of racist group, or they've come from another agency where they've had multiple different complaints of the same nature as what they're being accused of. And I can tell you that for the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, that they conduct an extremely thorough background regarding past associations. People have to turn over their passwords for their Twitter account, for their Facebook account, for all of their social media. There's a big dive into what their past look like. And we do eliminate people time and time again about little things, stupid things that they put on social media that actually cost them this career. But the question is, how do we get that out to the citizens to say that our background process, includes all of those? One of the things our background process also includes is, of course, the psychological evaluation, a polygraph, and also a medical. And some of those do have to be revamped because we need to look at today's age, because we're eliminating a lot of people who could be very good candidates because they don't have 20/20 vision and they wear glasses. So they're automatically eliminated from our process. That's old school. That goes back to the 60s of when you had to be perfect. And I don't know anybody that's got 20/20 vision these days. But one of the biggest ways that we were able to educate the community and the public about what it took to be a law enforcement officer and what actually our training looked like was our citizen academies, where we would open our doors and bring and welcome the community into our world and say, okay, if you're going to be a law enforcement officer, this is what's going to take. And granted, it was a thumbnail sketch, just kind of a snapshot of what it was, and what it is that we do. But I don't know one person that came away from that Citizen Academy that didn't say, wow, I had no idea of how much actually went on. And many of those people turned into being longtime volunteers for the Sheriff's Department. It takes money, and one of the things that, of course, gets cut are those feel nice programs when we do lose funding. But when we have a community outcry that there is something wrong with our police agency, isn't it worth our dollar to invite those community members into our house, for lack of better, and say, come and look at us and see what it is we actually do, and you be the voice for the effort that we're making to provide the best qualified, best trained law enforcement officers for your community. And then if they take issue with anything, that's what we're there for, is to have that conversation to try to make ado to these questions and these concerns that the community has. So it's a very difficult subject to actually talk about, because it's always on the peripheral. You know, we're in this to get the job done. We need to move forward. It's always very, very fast paced. And we don't take the step back to say, okay, wait a minute. What would it take for us to educate the community about how intricate our process is to get hired? Not to scare people off, but to educate them that we don't want to work with people who are going to get us in trouble. We don't want to work with people who are going to harass and maim the community. We want the top candidates to be Pierce County deputy sheriffs and nothing less than that.
Thank you. As a graduate of the Citizens Academy, I can tell you it was definitely an eye-opener in how the police functions. So how would you spend your limited budget that you have to spread the word to the community? Would that be a priority that each of you would have to get out into the community with a Citizens Academy and just basically get the message out in that manner? Janice, have you attended a Citizens Academy, Janice?
I have not, but yeah, that would be something that would be definitely important to keep going and to let folks know that it's out there. I know people who have gone through that, friends of mine, and said it was very eye-opening, as you said. But yeah, also just looking for more ways to message things out beyond the Facebook forum, just maximizing whatever social media there is, and the, old-fashioned media too, just to let folks know when there's opportunity to give input into the office or to find out more about it, I think would be great. Just building relationships with the community in every way possible.
Okay, thank you. Cyndie, would you prioritize a budget line item to ensure that Citizens Academies were provided throughout the county?
Oh, most definitely, because we have to attack the issue of the police being discredited. And this is the simplest way that we can do it. Of course, with what's going on with COVID, it's very, very difficult to do that. But guess what's come into our world that we really never realized that we had? And that's the thing called Zoom and Teams. And we've been able to keep connections and have connections with people we've never had before because of this technology. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I live way south in Pierce County, and for me to come up to University Place is probably a good 50-minute drive. And if I had to go from meeting to meeting to meeting, I might only be able to get maybe 2 or 3 meetings in a day. I had 6 Zooms today. And so for the efficiency part of it, it is wonderful. You do miss some of the personal sides of this, but why couldn't the new sheriff come in and say, on the 15th of every month, I'm going to hold a Zoom meeting. I'm going to limit participation to X numbers, and this is what the topic is going to be. And just bring it out and bring it forward and let there be an open discussion about what the concerns are and what the sheriff's department is or isn't doing on certain topics. I think that our Ed and his team have done a wonderful job with our social media platform, but there's something about reading it, and then there's something about talking about it and feeling like you actually can raise your hand and ask a question. And you get the real reaction from a person when you're talking with them, because you know whether or not they looked up the answer or whether or not they really knew the answer or was willing to tell you they didn't know the answer. And so I think there's some there's more credibility to that.
Thank you. Ed?
Well, absolutely. I agree with Cyndie and some of the things Janice said. I mean, it's absolutely, we have a new way of connecting with community. I think I had done Zoom 1 or 2 times before COVID, and where we're at right now and meetings. And now I don't know how, it has been a long time since we've actually had a real meeting with people. We actually have our command staff downtown in their own offices having Zoom meetings when they're 10 feet apart from each other, different rooms. And that's because we don't want to violate the rules and have a group of people in a room. And we're all getting really good at it. And I've actually had people FaceTime me on my phone that probably never FaceTimed before. And I've had conversations with citizens on FaceTime where I haven't before. It's a great tool. I don't know if that's going to be a detriment to society overall and businesses. That's yet to be determined, but I know it's a great thing for law enforcement. It's a good way for us to connect with people. I remember years ago going out to Grange halls and driving 2 hours and 15 people would show up, you know, in Eastern Pierce County or somewhere. And now you can announce a meeting and do a town hall or do a question and answers thing once a month and have a different subject. As we evolve and do that as sheriff. And right now we've been filming Paul Pastor and sending his message out through social media. And we do more social media than Facebook. We have 20,000 in our Twitter and our Instagram account. So we do Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And I know with the new generation coming up, there's going to be another one because it changes about every 10 years for every level of adult. But stay up with the times, use all our social media, use the Zoom and Microsoft meetings, connect with people. Somebody wants to FaceTime and have a meeting because they have a problem. They don't need to come downtown. We'll be able to connect with more people. We'll be able to have more people that are going to be able to attend because they don't have the hour commute, like Cyndie said. And people live way out in the Key Peninsula, clear out in Eatonville, will be able to, from their own homes or their business, contact us and let us know their concerns face to face. And I'm looking forward to it. And through COVID and through this election process, we've all probably gotten pretty good at this.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more comfortable than we like. Yeah. As we begin to wind us down, I know that law enforcement typically is not the #1 go-to in the media or in the public eye as far as public support goes. So if you had a magic wand, how would you like to see the public turn out to support law enforcement? And let's go to Janice here.
Well, I'm probably one of those folks who would be on the side of not being a huge supporter. So I just want to be clear about that because I have a good representation of that side of things. And I think that what would help is real conversations and real interest being shown from both sides about how to make the system equitable, safe, and healthy for everyone in our community. As I've said, it can't be a system that only works well for white people. If we have our Black neighbors feeling threatened by law enforcement, and like I said, parents having to have the talk with their young sons about every little detail of how you have to act if you get pulled over, and then being afraid that their child's going to be the next hashtag or that they will be the next hashtag. That is not working. And it, in my mind, in the community, in a lot of places, it should be a community emergency and it needs to be given that level of attention. So I just want to be very clear about that. And I think one of my favorite teachers is Patrice Cullors, who's a co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement. And one of my favorite quotes from her is, "What would it look like if we invested in Black life, in Black people thriving, having access realized for Black people healing, being cared for, given full dignity and thriving? If we create an environment where that is happening, then we create an environment for all people to thrive." And I think that's where what the conversation needs to be about at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Cyndie.
I think if you were to ask that question of my deputies, their response would be, well, what can we do to help the community better? They are very, I would say, emotional about the fact that they are feeling as though every turn that they take, they're being criticized for the actions of others. And I don't believe that that is a fair representation. I think we are all individuals, and each one of us have different backgrounds, different exposures, different realizations of what the truth is. And to group that into a profession is unfair. And the deputies are wanting to serve the community. They want to put the right foot forward. They want to do good by their badge and by their job. But if the community is asking, what can we do to support you? Volunteer. Volunteer in your local community groups and help us bridge the gap that is turning into this massive river that we need to bring back together so we can move on and apply for the job. If you're a minority, if you're Black, if you're Asian, if you're Hispanic, we need diversity within our law enforcement ranks. Step up to the plate and help us get over this hurdle to what the new policing can be, what the new society can look like. Help us understand and teach us how we can make everything better. So it's a two-way street in the regards of wanting to help as far as being wanted to help. And I'm hoping that the conversation continues. I'm hoping that we make the advancements, because if we don't, I'm very, very afraid of what the future will hold.
Thank you. Ed, question to you.
Well, I think a lot of the topics that we're talking about are a national problem, and it's in the national psyche, and it is perceived sometimes more than the reality. Our department that does a good job of not having those issues as much as an urban department does, because we're more rural, and more people of color live in the urban areas and not so much in the rural areas. And that's something that's happened over the years through many different reasons that aren't right, because there weren't other places to go. So when you talk about racism and people of color and you go way out into certain parts of the county, it's pretty white. And you go to certain parts in the urban areas, it's pretty Black. So as a society, we need to learn to melt better to begin with, so everybody understands each other. As a law enforcement agency, we also need to understand all sides of it. But our department does a really good job, and I don't want to say that we don't have anything to learn. Absolutely, we got more to learn. We need to understand not only Black Lives Matter, but we need to understand the Asian culture, whether it be the Koreans or whether it be other types of Asian cultures. We also have to understand the Hispanic culture, because I know they're afraid of police too, especially the migrant farm workers that move around. So there's many cultures that need to come to the table, and we need to go to the table and understand where each other's coming from, each other's hardships, what our job is, and what does the community want our job to be. And that comes from all communities of color, all races, all genders, and it shouldn't be specific to one. It should be everybody. That way, we're all in it together, and when everybody's in it together and everybody's communicating, I think we can get there.
Okay, thank you. Well, at this point, I think we've pretty much covered all the major overview topics. I'd like to provide each of you with an opportunity to address any issues that you may feel is important, but we haven't really had a discussion about this evening, to better inform the voters of University Place about your particular campaign and interests and priorities for the Sheriff's Department. So I'll allow you each a few minutes to kind of wrap up your campaign, so to speak, before we close out the evening. So with that, I will start with Ed Troyer.
Well, I'm very fortunate to have been endorsed by Sheriff Paul Pastor, our outgoing sheriff who's recently retired. And I've worked with him for so many years, and I've learned so much from him on how to treat people and to do the right thing. And doing the right thing might not always be the popular thing, but it's to do the right thing. I think that if you bring communities of faith together with nonprofits, and you bring nonprofits into charity work and have our people engage in those of people that are there, we can come together and solve a lot of issues. When you talk about community policing, it used to be guys riding bikes and saying hi to businesses and neighbors. But community policing now means we need just as much back from them as that we give them. And I think by moving forward, and I believe that we can integrate everybody together to solve the same problems, because we all want the same thing. We all want a good life. We want to raise our families. We want to move forward, be positive, help people that need help, help those in need, the vulnerable. That's when I was lucky enough to start our elder crime abuse program with Crime Stoppers, and the prosecutor followed up with a prosecutor to, charge those crimes. And we can do those things when everybody comes together. And there's no reason why we can't do it with communities of race or gender or whatever anybody wants it to be, as long as we're communicating back and forth. Because right now, what's happening, what we did before in law enforcement didn't work. What we're doing right now, unfortunately, I believe it's making it worse. We need to reconcile and grow and move and figure it out together.
Okay, thank you. Janice, do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, I just want to go back to the new vision that I'm interested in of looking at community safety and inviting everyone in the community to join me in thinking about what that could be, what we could look like in a place where we don't rely, where our number one go-to isn't calling for an armed officer. And so just giving a community space to that, and to thinking about how we want to care for one another in our communities, and looking at new ways of doing that, models that are already out there. And I think that to make that happen, it probably requires a sort of frame of mind that hasn't been spent in law enforcement for a lifetime, where you come to see things in a specific way to get the job done. So I think it would be a great project to bring everyone along and talk about these issues and see how we can reach a meeting of the minds and look at new great possibilities, and have Pierce County sort of be the epicenter of really exciting changes in community safety.
Well, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Cyndie, your final words.
Well, again, thank you so much for hosting us this evening. It's been a great conversation, and I really do appreciate it. What I would like to say is what I bring to the table is it is a lifetime of law enforcement, but it's also that the fact that, you know, I'm also a mother, and so I've raised my children. My deputies I consider to be my children, and we have that relationship of caring about what happens to each other, and caring about what's going on in each other's lives. And so let's not forget the personal side of each one of these deputies that make the sacrifice to work on Christmas, make the sacrifice to miss their child's first birthday, make the sacrifice for not being able to go on vacation with the rest of their family, to be in the community, to offer what they feel that they can offer to keep us safe at night, and to keep us away from evil that is around us. I mean, we do have to admit that there are people out there who wanted to do harm to us, and there has to be someone there to address that and be willing to stand up and take that challenge on. What I would like to say is, I do recognize that we are at a crossroads within policing, and I think you have to have someone who has that experience to know what has been tried in the past and has not worked. We don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. Having that experience and being exposed to all of the different programs and units that I've been exposed to in the Sheriff's Department allows me that broad sense of community and the broad sense of experience to know where we can try things that may work, as I gave examples of this evening. And so much so that not only has the deputies of the law enforcement side, the jail side, also the firefighters in Eastern Pierce County and the dispatchers all have endorsed me to be the next sheriff because they trust me to bring this department forward in the manner that it needs to protect every single one of not only the officers that will work for me, but for the community. And our goal is to make the community proud of us and to be the leader and in challenging head on all of these issues that are being put in the face of law enforcement and overcoming them and move our society forward. So again, thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank each one of you for sharing your time and energy with me this evening, your qualifications and your insights. I personally learned a lot from each of the three of you about your qualifications. I wish every voter could have this one-on-one with candidates and learn more about their platforms. And it's truly been a pleasure to speak with you tonight. And wish you each luck. Unfortunately, only one will be winning the upcoming election. But for the voters in University Place and the citizens in University Place, you have tonight been introduced to the candidates Ed Troyer and Cyndie Fajardo, and our write-in candidate Janice Bridges. So I would like you to take the information that you have learned from this forum this evening as you make your critical vote for this elected position. As a reminder, ballots are due in the drop box and in the mail no later than Tuesday, November 3rd. The drop box in University Place is located by the West Pierce Fire Department at 3631 Drexler Drive. Please take the time, get out, vote for who you feel is the most qualified candidate for the Sheriff Department and for all other elected positions on the November 3rd ballot. And again, I want to say thank you very much. And I think at this point, we can discontinue the recording of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.